Hello guys, so this is the second half of our Heifer management lecture series. So earlier we talked about the first two topics of Heifer management, which are how you select high quality animals, especially good genetics and growth potential. And then also we talked about heifer breeding management, specifically about growth and age goals when it comes to breeding selection of good breeding stock. So today we'll be covering these two topics, the last two topics of heifer management, which are heifer nutrition and heifer housing. Right. So one of the fundamentals of heifer feeding is that they have high nutritional demands than cows, right? Higher demands than cows, because now for a fully grown cow, right, it doesn't it doesn't try to grow, right? There is no growth is complete, whereas heifers, they are still trying to grow, as well as we are trying to reproduce, breed them simultaneously, right? So as a result, they have greater nutritional demands compared to fully grown cows, right? So that is one of the major challenges we face, right? So as we talked about earlier also, the good thing is, although they have greater nutritional demands, the good news is that they are more feed efficient than, the young ones are more feed efficient than the older ones or heavier ones, right? So I showed you this table at certain point, right? So they have a better feed conversion ratio, right? So meaning this animal will gain 1 kilogram of body weight at n kg, whereas this one needs more than n, 150% of that, to gain the same kilogram of body weight, right? So this is why it is important, right? So the young animals, they have a greater nutritional demand, but if you feed them properly, if you meet those demands, the chances are they will convert that at a higher efficiency to body weight, right? So it would be more profitable to gain body weight at an early age rather than at a older age, right? So that this is why we always say, calf management, heifer management is very important, because your eventual profit margin you will make as a dairy farmer from milking, it depends here. A lot of it depends at the early stage. So if you screw up here, you don't get the proper body weight gain, however good you do at the end with milking animals, you're ultimately failing. You have already failed at the beginning, so you're going to lose that. You miss the opportunity to get the maximum profit. Right, so as I talked mentioned last week also, the first 9 months, right? So first 10, 11, 9 months is critical, because that's when we expect about 50% of mature live weight to be gained, right? So that is critical, because that's where the most of the skeletal development takes place, right? So skeletal development means, broader and taller heifers, they have less problems at carving, right? So remember, we are not promoting fat animals, right? We are promoting lean body growth, right? So lean means muscle and skeleton versus excessive fat deposition, right? So that's what we are mostly concerned about, not increasing body condition score, right? So body condition score is a direct representation of the percentage of fat, right? Body fat, right? Whereas that's not what we promote. in heifers. We want lean body growth, right? Lean weight. Right, so you should know this, right? So generally, the average body weight gain, average daily gain is about that, right? That we want to target in Holstein Friesians and in jerseys, right? So higher the better, right? So that at certain points, with really good management, the body weight gain, average daily gain, can even be 1.25 kilograms a day, right? Under very good conditions. So it should be anywhere above 750 grams, right? So that should be the goal. But when we do certain calculations during today's lecture, you will see that you don't always need that much, right? If you have done a good job from the beginning, right? So the important thing is you can't just expect this if you don't feed it, right? So they should be fed so that they can give this output, right? So you can't give a poor input and expect a great output. So if you want a great output, you have to give a great input, right? So that is where most of our farm managers fail, right? So we don't want to formulate a single feeding program to all heifers until calving, because they basically divide the feeding into three phases because they have different demands, right, requirements. Right, so the basic three phases are weaning to 9 months. Right, so before weaning, that would be pre-weaning management. I think we talked about this at the very first lecture, or the very few slides. Right. So pre-weaning phase, then weaning to 9 months, 9 to 15. Right, so 15 is usually breeding, and then 15 to 24, which is calving. Right. So which one of these groups do you think has the highest energy and protein demand? Right? It would be this group, right? That is the group, like I said earlier also, has the highest skeletal muscular development in this group. Therefore, they have the highest demand. And in addition to that, the rumens are still growing. So if you look at the ratio of rumen capacity to body weight, this in this group you might have that the most unfavorable ratio there, the smallest rumen capacity. Therefore, you can't just give bulky food, right? You have to give highly nutritive food, right? That are less bulky, right? So that is where this group becomes specifically more important than the two other groups, right? So all these we have talked about earlier, right? So we probably, depending on the weaning program you adopt, you typically we recommend feeding a continuing carb starter for 2 to 4 weeks after weaning, right? That was to minimize stress. And so if we achieve that 1 kilo or more at the time of weaning, by the end of these 2 to 4 weeks, they might be eating as much as 2.5 kilograms per day, right? Now, farmers may not like this. If you don't know real dairy, they may have a resistance to this. They might think, oh my God, this calf is eating like greedy, 2.5 kilograms a day of carb starter at 80 rupees per kilo. That's like 200 rupees worth of concentrate this animal is eating, but it's not giving me any milk, right? But then this is where you have to come in and tell the farmer, okay, see, your animal might be eating 200 rupees worth of concentrates. So right now it's probably, if it's eating 2.5 kilos of concentrate, it's probably gaining more than 1.25 kilograms a day, right? At the ratio of 1 to 2 feed conversion ratio, right? Or 1 to 3 maybe, depending on the body weight, right? But so you basically get at least 1 kilogram of body weight gain here for the 200 rupees you invest. But if you want to gain this 1 kilogram at a later stage, then you will have to invest more, right? So for example, if you look at this chart, right, so at 300 kilograms, right, so it has to eat 5.5 kilograms versus 3 kilos here, right? So almost twice the quantity. And of course the feed cost will be slightly lower, right? Therefore, it will even out a little, but even then, it's more expensive to gain body weight here than here. So you have to explain this to the farmer and convince him to continue feeding ad-lib carb starter at this stage. Right? So we talked about gradual introduction of hay or last pasture. So if your forage is of high quality, like above 10 megajoules of metabolizable energy per kilogram dry matter, then you will be able to achieve the growth targets with pasture alone, without giving any concentrate feeds. But unfortunately, the pastures we have in Sri Lanka, of course, Guinea is out at this for this kind of animal. Even CO3, they don't have this much energy, right? So you will have to go for a high quality pasture, like either ryegrass or even maize, right? High quality maize, uh, for the maize, for the not just for the maize, even the other maize grain variety, so mixed whole crop, you will have this amount of energy, right? So that's important, right? So if you don't have this, then of course you will have to uh, supplement with concentrate feeds, right? Which is what we typically do in Sri Lanka, right? um, okay, so remember the goals you have to achieve during this period. So one is, at 6 months, we say we need to achieve 30% of the adult live weight, right? And by 9 months, right? So it might be close to 40, 45 percent of the that live weight, right? So you have to set a goal, basically, right? You want to say, okay, this is what I want to achieve at 9 months, and I'm going to feed to achieve that, right? So we will talk about that in a couple of slides, right? Right. And then 9 to 15 months, right? So you don't need as such a high energy and protein as this group, right? Because you only have to achieve maybe 5 to 10% of the body weight, of the live weight, right, within 6 months, right? So it's not that challenging, and also the rumen capacity has increased, so the quality doesn't need to be as high as here, right? However, it will be need large quantities, right? Because you can expect them to achieve about uh, the weight here. So here, I don't want to go into too much detail because I have given questions, right, which I want you to answer, right? But typically, if you think about it, so if you consider the adult weight to be 700 kilograms, right? So here we are looking at 210 kilograms, right, by the age of 6 months, right? And here, if our target is 40% at 9 months, right? Because we want puberty somewhere around 1 year, right? 11, 12, 13 months, and that is 45 to 50% of body weight, right? So we want to gain another 10% from 6 to 9 months, that's 70 kilos, right? So 40%, and then by the end of for the next 6 months, right? So you want to gain another maybe 10%, right? um, 10 to 20%, 60%, right? So we want to go up to 55 to 60% at breeding, right? So 20% is another 140 kilograms over 6 months, right? So that is the calculation you want to do. Like I said, I want to go into too much detail because I have given you calculations, right, for you to do. So you need to fill in all these blanks. Right, then over the next last phase of the heifer, you have 9 months and you need to gain another 20 to 25% of the adult live weight, right, which is for a 700 kg animal. It could be anywhere from around 140 to 170 kilograms, right? You want to gain within these 9 months. But then there are going to be other challenges. The animal is already pregnant, so animal gets pregnant here, right? And then you'll have to add some more to that because of the pregnancy, right? So we will go into details, but you need to be able to identify. Need to know the major features, major differences between these three phases. The targets to achieve is very important. You need to have a clear cut idea about that. What percentage, what kilogram body weight at the end of this phase, at the end of this phase, at the end of this phase, so on and so forth, right? And you have to know this for both the Holstein Friesians, purebred jerseys, crossbreds, the type of animal in your area, right? So you need to know those numbers in your heart, right? If somebody asks, you have to be able to say pat 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 gala. You have to be able to give those out, calculate in the back, right? Because that's the group you have, that's the group you work with. You need to know this, right? Right. So we did the growth curves during part one of the Heifer lecture series for Holstein Friesians and Jerseys. Right. So I showed you the 90th percentile and the 50th percentile, but you need to know that it might be as low as this, right? So this was in pounds, right? I converted it into approximate kilograms. Right, so a very poorly grown animal in the fifth percentile of the growth curve will have a body weight of around 400 kilograms, right? So if you have any host inflations that are 400 kilograms mature weight, that means it's at the bottom of the growth curve, right? So we want them to be at least here, right? Which is 540 mature weight. I think that's about what we have in Sri Lanka overall. If you go to, of course, even small farms, they do have 600 kilograms and above, which is great, right? So that is the target, as high as 700 kilograms, that would be the top end, right? Of course, and this depends on uh, where you get your Frisians from now. Usually it's considered that US Frisians are larger than the average Australian Frisian animal, right? So large is not always the best option, as we will see during our lecture series as we proceed to nutrition, right? Cow nutrition, large is not always the best, right? Okay, right. So for your weaning, right, you need to know if you're weaning around by 2 kilogram 2 months, right? So this is the kind of weight you can expect to see. It can be as high as 100 kilograms almost, or as low as 50 kilograms, right? So you don't want them to be 50, you want them to be at least 80, 100. But remember, I'm not saying your weaning goal should be 80 kilos, right? I'm saying by 80 kilos, by the time it eats 1 kilogram, right, it should be at least 80 kilos and above, right? So that's what I'm saying. And ideally you need to get that at 2 months, right? Not at 4 months, because even at 4 months it's possible for the animal to be 100 kilograms, right? But that's not what we want. We want them to be 80 to 100 kilograms here, right? At 2 months, that should be our goal, right? 10 weeks maximum, right? 8 weeks ideally. Okay, right. So you, based on that, based on the number here, you need to know what is your 85%, what is your 55 or 60%, what is your 45 or 50%, and what is your 30%, so that you can set goals for the different age categories, right? So in addition to uh, the feed requirements, right? You need to know the water requirements also, right? So they will, so look at the difference of water depending on the temperature, right? So at 4 degrees, for a 450 kilogram animal, it might be like 28, and for 27 degrees, it might be, see, look at the difference, 20 liters difference, right? So Nuareli animal, I don't think it's going to be 4 degrees, it might be 10 to 15 degrees, so it will be slightly higher than this. But an animal in Candy, this might be the typical water requirement per day, right? And then for an animal in, Mulathiu or Hambantota, it will be even higher. So typically we say 3 to 6 liters of water per kilogram of dry matter eaten. So as you will find out as we go on, a very good animal growing at 1 kilogram a day, 500 kilograms, will eat about 10 kilograms of dry matter, right? So this animal might be eating as much as 10 kilograms of dry matter. So 10 kilograms of dry matter might be 30 liters of water or 60 liters of water, depending on the temperature, right? So that kind of is what this shows, right? So you need to be aware of this, and of course it also depends on the mineral salt intake, right, of the diet. Is it very dry, is it soggy, what kind of a diet is it? So it all depends on that and the temperature. Right, so all this is good. So all this theory is nice, right? But in the field situation, what happens? In the field situation, what happens is a farmer comes and tells you, I bought a heifer, sir or madam. How and what should I feed her, right? And when the farmer asks you that, you, the vet, uh, can't be like this, right? So you have to have your answers, like I said, at the tip of your tongue. If you give this look, right, the farmer is going to make fun of you. He's not going to come back to you. You are going to lose a client, you are going to lose income, you are going to lose business, and importantly, country is going to lose a profitable farmer. His enthusiasm goes away, the animal becomes a non-productive animal, right? So that's not what you and I want, right? So how do you devise a heifer feeding program to such a heifer, right? So this is what you have to do, right? So this is what you have to actually do. You have to back calculate from the mature body weight. So this is what we call the ALW, adult live weight, right? So this is your step number one, right? So the moment the farmer brings you this heifer, you need to think, okay, this is a Holstein Friesian, looks like a purebred, right? What will this animals, does it look like a stunted animal? Does it look like a, high quality animal with very good growth potential, right? So this is where you can ask some questions from the farmer. What were the parents like? Did you see the parents? What was it? Is it an AI animal? Was it naturally bred? How large was the mother? Was it a 400 kg animal? Was it a 700 kg animal? what was the parity of the mother. So by asking all these questions, you need to determine if this animal has the potential to become a 700 kg animal, a 600 kg animal, or is it going to be an average 450 kilogram animal, right? So that is your first step, right? And so if you know that, you can determine the age at first carving, right? So again, it might be 80%, it might be 82%, it might be 85%. So you need to know that, right? You need to make a decision on that, right? And then you know the carving age target, right? So if you thought, okay, this animal realistically, okay, let's think about it. So if it's candy, there is sufficient lush pasture, right, throughout the year, right? So you question the farmer and ask him, and you look at his finances. Is he going to feed concentrate feed, or is he going to be stingy, right? Is he not even going to have food for his family? So if he's not going to have food for his family, he's not going to invest on food for concentrate feed for the calf. So you need to ask, or you need to inquire about all of these, right, to come to this decision, right? So thereby you set the carving age target. Also, the body weight. Then you set the age target. You think, is it going to happen in 24 months, or do you think it's going to get 27 months, it's going to get delayed, right? So maybe the calf is already the heifer is already 8 months old, but only 200 kilos, right? So you have to think about all this, right? So you need to determine the target weight at first carving. Then you need to determine the carving age at first target, right? And then you need to, so if you know, okay, let's say all this, and you unfortunately the age is going to be, you think it's not going to, you won't be able to get a calf before 30 months, huh? So just as an example, so that is your decision. Okay, if it's going to be 30 months, then it needs to be bred by, it needs to become pregnant by 21 months, right? So which means by about 21 months, it has to be brought up to 55% of the mature weight. So let's say if we determined it was going to be a 600 kg animal, 55% would be like 330 kilos, right? So by 21 months, I need to achieve 330 kilos, right? And then, okay, so 21 months at the target age, right? 21 months, 330 kilos. And now currently it is, let's say, 5 months old, and 5 months old and 200 kilos, right? So you need to achieve um, uh, 5 months old, so you have 16 months for it to get pregnant. 15 months, let's say. Over the next 15 months, you have to increase the body weight from 200 to, what did I say, 200, let's say 150, 150 to 330. So you have 15 months to gain 180 kilos or whatever, right? So depending on that, you look at, okay, 180 kilos over 15 months. What is that growth rate? For that growth rate, how much energy should you give for maintenance and daily growth? So this is how you do this calculation, right? So instead of giving this look, right, you have to ask him certain questions, the ones that I mentioned earlier, right? I mean, this is where you would start. How old is it? What's the current weight, right? Did you see the parents? How large was the mother? Was this an AI calf, or was it a random bull? How large was the father, right? uh, do you have any other cows at home? Is this your first one, or are you a pro of dairy farming, right? What do you typically feed your other animals? Do you give calf starter? Did this animal get calf starter? Are you willing to spend this amount of money to feed this animal, right? So based on the answer you get to all of these questions, you determine, okay, this animal realistically will not grow more than 500 kgs, or this animal can grow up to 700 kg because the genetics look really good, the farmer looks really determined, the farmer has the financial background to do this, right? Okay, so we are targeting 700 kilograms, right? So you need to ask these questions and determine what the final body weight is going to be, right? So that is for an individual animal, but even if you are the manager of a large scale farm, same thing, you can set goals, right? Saying, okay, is this going to be a what is our goal going to be? Is it 600, 700, 650, so on, right? I hope that is clear. And based on that, like I said earlier, you devise the feeding program, right? uh, okay, so you can take that as a question, right? So this is a 4-month old 160 kilogram purebred Holstein Friesian heifer. So assume the farmer is going to go all out in feeding this animal. Farmer is financially sound, he wants to get the maximum potential of this calf, right? So he's doing everything you will tell him. So you can set the target mature weight as 700 kilograms, right? So there's we still have enough time. You think this will you will be able to get a first calving age of 27 months, right? So taking this into consideration, 4 months old, currently 160 kilograms in weight, right? Final weight is going to be 700 kilograms. Your goal is to get the first calf at 27 months, right? So with that, you should be able to do all of this. 85% here, calving age 27 months, right? And so if calving age is 27 months, breeding age should be like 17 or 18 months, right? So you start breeding at 17 months. If you miss the first heat, if you miss the not the heat, if it doesn't get the pregnant the first time, it gets pregnant the second time. So by 18 months it's pregnant, and by 27 months it can calve, right? Okay, so basically this is what you need to fill out, right? So age at first calving in this example is going to be 27 months, mature body weight, like I said, 700 kilograms, right? Current age 4 months, current weight 160 kilograms. So you fill this out, right? But like we said earlier, the growth rates and are not the same for these three phases, from weaning to 9 months, 9 to 15, and 15 to 24. Or here it would be from 9 to 18, and 18 to 24, right? So weaning to 9, 9 to 18, 18 to 24, 27 months, right? So for these three phases, you need to do this differently. It's not going to have a constant growth rate through these through three phases. It will be different. So you need to devise the feeding program for the three phases, right? Okay, so now you know the growth rate or the average daily gain, but so what? How do you go from there to applied feeding? Right. So you need to be able to the growth rate, right? So this is what you want to calculate. But then how do you achieve that, right? So to do that, uh, you need to know this, right? You need to know what the maintenance energy requirement of the animal is going to be. You need to know what the growth rate is going to be, right? So this is what you calculated, right? So based on the previous calculation, can it grow at 600 grams per day to achieve this goal? Should it go at 1 kilogram per day? So let's briefly go back here, right? So we said currently 4 months and 160 kilograms, right? So let's say our goal was to get the first calf at 700, I'm sorry, 27 months, right? So 700 kilograms in 27 months, right? So we have to gain 540 kilos, right? So we have to achieve 540 kilos in 23 months, right? 540 kilos in 23 months. I'm not sure if you can see my calculator, right? But here I have brought this 540 kilos, right? Divided by 23 months, right? So I'm going to multiply that. 23 times 30 days, right? So 540 kilograms divided by that, so 690 days, right? 690 days over 23 months, right? So that is the growth rate you require, almost 800 grams per day, right? So that your answer here should be something like that, depending on the target you set, right? So if the target you set was 600 kilograms, right? So first of all, 600 minus 160 is the current weight, right? So that's 440, right? So you have to gain 440 kilos, right, over 23 months. 23 months times 30 days equals, see, now the growth rate is only 600 grams, right? So this is how you decide. Like I said, you ask all those background questions from the farmer and you determine if it's going to be a 700 kilogram animal or is it going to be a 600 kilogram animal. Can the farmer do it? Is the farmer willing to do the investments, right? Is he willing to do the management, take the management related challenges, right? So depending on all that, you decide what the farmer, what would be a realistic mature weight for this heifer, right? And so based on that, you do these calculations. Okay, right. Okay, right. So I talked about this maintenance energy and growth requirement during our pre-weaning calf management, right? So this applies everywhere, whether it's heifer, uh, or adult animal. Of course, adult animal, once growth is completed, there won't be a growth requirement, but there will be a requirement for production, right, of milk, right? So but maintenance is always there, right? So now how do we go on from there, right? So we need to know, right, that for different weights, see, for 100 kilograms, 200, 300, obviously the maintenance requirement is different, right? So a 100 kg animal will have a, so this is not the main, this is not energy, yeah? This shows the dry matter requirement per head per day, right? For maintenance, typically they have to eat like 1.6 kilograms, right? So these are diet containing this amount of energy, right? So depending on the energy level of the diet, this kilogram number will be different, right? So of course, as you can see, the heavier the animal, the more the animal needs to eat for maintenance, right? So this animal needs to eat, 450 kg animal needs to eat 5 kilograms dry matter, right? So what's the actual energy it needs for maintenance? Take a minute, think about it. What's the actual energy requirement of this animal? 450 kilogram animal needs 5 kg. So what's the energy requirement? If you answered 5 times 11, 55 megajoules, of metabolizable energy, you got it right, right? So that should be the answer, right? So for a 400 kg animal, that would be 4.5 kilos times 11 megajoules, right? So that's maintenance, right? So now, when I give questions at the exam, I see students saying, so they know maintenance, but they say, okay, in addition to maintenance energy, the animal needs energy for metabolism, for ruminal activity, for liver activity, right? For digestion. All these are energy consuming things, for respiration, for heartbeat, right? For regurgitation. No, so that is maintenance. All that is maintenance. All the cellular molecular reactions, ATP becomes ADP plus AMP phosphate, all these chemical reactions, DNA replication, cell division, right, ovulation, spermatogenesis, right, hepatocyte proliferation, all that is maintenance, right? Brain activity, neuron signal transmission, all that goes under maintenance. You don't need another separate energy other than that for maintenance. So that is all maintenance. And then of course growth is different, right? Cellular proliferation for maintenance is different. Cellular proliferation for growth is different, right? So if it's maintenance only, the cell number will not increase, but there is still cell division. But if it is growth, muscle cell number will increase, which incurs additional energy for growth, right? So I hope that is understood. And obviously, animal gaining 400 grams per day versus 800 grams per day or a kilo a day would have different growth requirements, right? So depending on the growth rates here, for different growth rates, the intake and energy requirement are also obviously different, right? So 150 kilogram animal gaining only 400 grams per day needs about 1 kilogram to eat, but the same animal, if it gains 1 kilo a day, it needs to eat more than 2 kilograms, right? So it's really basic if you think about it, right? Okay, so taking this 150 kilogram animal as an example, right? What's the total dry matter intake for a 150 kilogram heifer growing at 600 grams per day based on these two charts? Take a minute. Total dry matter intake. What's your answer? Right? So if you answered 2.2 kilograms plus 1.3 equals 3.5 kilograms, you got the right answer, right? But that, remember, that is not everything. So you shouldn't think, okay, 150 kilogram animal, I should feed 3.5 kilograms of anything and everything. You're wrong, right? So you can't expect the requirement to be fulfilled by feeding 3.5 kilograms of dry matter from lush pasture versus straw versus CO3 grass versus ryegrass versus kiku versus maize versus concentrate feeds, right? So it's not right, right? So this is assuming the feed has 11 megajoules of metabolizable energy per kilogram, right? So if it had 11 megajoules, right? Okay, then great. Um, you get this, right? 3.5, right? So what is the actual energy requirement here is 3.5 kilograms times 11, which will be something like 41 megajoules, right? So that is the actual energy requirement, right? So but if your feed only has 8 megajoules per kilogram of metabolizable energy, then 40 divided by 8, this animal needs to eat 5 kilograms in total, right? So you have to calculate the maintenance requirement and growth requirement separately, right? I hope that is understood, right? So the decisive factor is not kilograms but energy, right? So depending on the energy requirement, uh, based on the feed value of the energy value of the feed, right, you calculate the number of kilos, right? So I hope that is clear to you, right? So there are formulas, right, to calculate, but those formulas are, fairly complicated, and they change from, body weight to body weight, right? So therefore you can memorize this kind of a chart. I mean, you don't have to memorize. If you have to deal with a heifer today, or go to a farm to do some feed calculations, you take a printout of this, and just have a rough idea about the kind of energy, right? So this is the maintenance requirement, and this is the growth requirement, right? So you add these up together to get the total. So for example, 100 kilogram animal growing at 1 kilogram per day requires a total of about 36 megajoules of metabolizable energy per day, right? A 300 kilogram animal, on the other hand, needs 42 for maintenance, 31 for growth, which is 73 megajoules of metabolizable energy per day. 500 kilogram animal needs in excess of 100 megajoules of metabolizable energy per day. Look at this figure. Percentage of protein goes down, right? And look at this, right? So do you think the energy requirement, growth energy, so obviously here, see, this is what we were talking about, the feed conversion ratio as well earlier, right? See, for growth per kilogram, right, it gaining 1 kilogram, so the energy required, see, goes up, right? So only 17 here, twice here, and more than twice here, 250% here, right? But look at the maintenance energy here. For 100, 19, let's say 20, but for 200 it's not 20 20 40, right? It's less than 100% of that. And when it becomes 300, 19 times 3 would be 57, but it's 42 here, right? So let's double this. 200, 32 plus 32, 64. For a 400 kg animal, it's less, right? So maintenance energy goes down, right, per unit kilogram as they age, but growth energy, energy required for growth, increases as they, right. um, so this shows now, so this is, remember, this is growth at a growth rate of 1 kilogram per day, yeah? So that should be that column, right? So but not everybody is going to grow at 1 kilogram per day. Our previous calculation showed growth at 600 grams per day or 800 grams per day, right? So depending on that, right, these will be the columns you need, right? So this will stay the same, maintenance, regardless of growth rate. This will be a function of the body weight, right? But this column will be different depending on the growth rate. So this shows the actual energy requirement, right, this table, whereas this table shows the dry matter intake, dry matter kilograms. So these dry matter kilograms per head per day, right? So this is the total, not only for growth but maintenance and growth, total dry matter intake, right? So I encourage you to go to these references I have given on each page, right? See, go to these references for further details, right? So read all of these, right? So remember, this is not the feed that needs to be offered because there is going to be wastage. This is the feed that the animal should eat, right? What should be offered is more than that. So these are minor points, but minor but very important points if you will need to factor in, right? Right. So obviously from this you can see that higher the growth rate, higher the feed intake for any given category, right? So what's important here is, a 250 kilogram animal, right, uh, needs less feed, right, to gain the same growth rate than, a 500 kg animal as a feed, as a ratio. See, if at the same ratio, 4.3 would have been 8.6 here. 4.8 would have been 9.6 here. 5.4 would have been 10.8, so on, right? So that's why we need to get the maximum growth at a lower body weight, because that would be more profitable to the farmer. The animal would give more body weight gain for a lesser quantity of feed eaten, right? Okay, so these were the formulas that I talked about earlier. Like I said, for different age groups, right? Different formula. So don't bother about this, right? So don't bother about this. I just showed it for sake of completion, right? But and these are probably not even the latest equations. These from 1970, Swanson, one of the landmark papers, right? So these are not even the latest formulas, right? So these I just give as an example. Right. Now, so we talked about maintenance energy, we talked about growth energy, energy for growth, and then during that last phase of the three phases of heifer management, that is from breeding to calving, right? There is another factor to consider, that is pregnancy, right? So initially, right, first 5 6 months, the energy required for the pregnancy is negligible because we're talking about an embryo or a fetus that is very small, right? So embryonic stage, of course, very very small, right? So we usually use the term embryo until about 42 days, right? And afterwards it becomes a fetus. Again, this is something that can change depending on the book you look at, right? So it's the last 3 months, see, 12 weeks before calving. It's the last 3 months where the energy requirement for pregnancy becomes, significant. Right? So by the due date, of course, it needs an additional 3 kilograms of dry matter, which is like 33 megajoules, right? For pregnancy alone, but usually it's negligible, right? So if you're calculating the energy requirement for a heifer in late gestation, you need to factor this in. Okay, that is very important, right? So taking all this into consideration, maintenance, growth, and pregnancy, try to answer these questions, right? So I'll no, I shouldn't help because you have all the answers here and bring these answers to the discussion, right? So refer to these tables, this table, this table, and this, right? You should be able to give the answers, right? So come ready with these answers. Right, so actually that concludes our feeding section for heifers. But remember, by all means, this was not a complete guide at all, right? Because I only talked about energy and maybe protein briefly, but feeding is not only about energy and feeding and protein, right? There's a lot of other things that go into it: fiber, ADF, NDF, right? All these anion, cation gaps, right? All minerals. I didn't talk about any of these because this is not a nutrition lecture, right? This is just a practical feeding thing. But for the majority of you working with small and medium scale farmers, this is more than enough, right? But if you're catering to large scale farms where there are 30, 50, 100 cows, where you need to really high producing enterprises, 30 liters of milk, 20 liters and above milk per day per cow, then you need to definitely consult a nutritionist, or you need to obtain more knowledge than this to formulate their diets. So this is for just for small and medium scale farmers, where your knowledge is really below this, just so that these just fundamental knowledge, right? Anything beyond that is beyond the scope of this lecture series, right? Okay, so we already know pre-weaning heifers should be kept in these individual pens or hutches, right? So that is pre-weaning animals, and of course, we don't immediately change them after weaning. We let them be there, 2 to 3 weeks, whatever, depending on your protocol, right? And then we change them to these little group pens where we house 3 to 5 animals depending on the management system, right? So these are group pen. So you don't want to put them straight away to 50 other calves, right? Because see, all this time they were with um, they were by themselves, right? So remember we said they should have this tactile and visual stimulation from the others, right? So that's why there are these nearby pens. So they have seen them, right? But they have never gone to actually in contact with them, right? So that is so if you straight away put them with 50 animals, they'll get a social shock or whatever, right? So that's why we want to take them there gradually. That's why we first put them in group pens of 3 to 5 animals per pen, right? And then afterwards, of course, we can, depending on the system, you can either turn them into grazing, right, as is the example here, right, or you can still house them indoors until they are bred, right? So then it will be a cut and feed system, right? So now remember, these were typically 3.5 feet by 4.5 feet, or 3 by 4, depending on the breed, which makes it about 12 to 15 square feet per pen per animal, right? Now this is slightly large, so we say this should be usually 12 by 12 feet. 12 by 12 is 144, right? So let's say 150 for ease of calculation. So 150 square feet, 5 animals, what does that give you, right? So you should be able to do that calculation based on whether it's 3 animals or 5 animals. Minimum square foot area for a heifer calf after weaning in a group pen, you need to know, right? So note the water cart here, right? So there should always be a water cart nearby when grazing. So what do you so this is Ridhyagama. So Ridhyagama 246 heifer calves here. This was very first MVSC batch. We made a trip to Ridhyagama, right? So 6 calves here, right? I'm not sure if they got the 30 square foot minimum here, right? So here's a calf with pot belly here, slightly. So what do you think these are? They certainly don't have 30 square feet here, right? What do you think these are? So these are actually auctions, right? So these are all buyers. These are auctioneers, right? So remember we said we talked about purchasing of heifers, right? So they can be sold as, post-weaning calves, pre-weaning calves at one stage. So there could be arrangements where, farmer A always sells calves to farmer B, right? Or there could be a case like this also, auctions, right? So this could be for heifer calves, this could be for male calves also, sold at, very low price, right? So these are definitely auctions. They are not calf pens. They don't have that 30 square feet or whatever. I'm sure they are highly stressed, right? These guys might even be pre-weaning ones, most likely pre-weaning ones, very small ones, right? Could be going for wheel calf, right? Most likely, so on, right? So these, of course, a communal feeder, right? Where they are feeding calves that are grazing. So again, probably pre-weaning calves, all of these, except this group that are post-weaning, right? So this is what a typical grower pen. So these are called grower pens. So the whole building would be the grower barn, right? This would be a grower pen. This should look like something like this, typically 12 feet by 12 feet, right? So something like that, structure like this, right? So this should also have a gate on this end. That end, of course, there is no gate, right? So it should be have a gate, and of course this might be a cold climate. That's why they have these tall walls, right? But in warm climates like Ridiyagama, you shouldn't have walls around. You should have ventilation all around, right? Okay. So 12 by 12 feet, this is, the litter or the bedding has been taken out, right? And these calves and bedding, right? So look at all the structures in here, not just the 12 by 12 feet grower barn. Can you name A, B, and C? What do you think they are? Right? So see if you can answer those. We can discuss those at the during the discussion, right? So this is an important component, right? This is right, but there are two here, so pay attention. Why are they different, right? So these shorter, these longer, right? So why but so this important, right? So we can call it a feed bunk or feed trough, right? And we talk about a feed bunk space, right? So you have to give them of course these are not heifers, these are adult animals, right? So whether for heifers or calves or adult animals, you have to give them a minimum length of feed bunk space, right? So otherwise, if you give them, let's say you have 20 animals in here, you give 2 feet of feed bunk for all of them. Can they all eat at once? No, they cannot, right? So that's why this becomes important. Feed bunk space becomes important in good uh, barn design, right? So these are some recommended feed bunk spaces, inches per head, right? Depending on the age category, right? You see, as they age, right, as the animals grow bigger, the feed bunk space obviously increases, right? So look at this. Feed is always available, right? So if the feed is always available, is there high competition among animals or not? No, right? So there will be high competition. There will not be high competition if the feed is available 24/7, right? But typically, our farms feed is not available abundantly. They, put the feed and the animals will finish it within a couple of hours. Right? So obviously, then competition will be higher. All animals will eat at once, and then you see the 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 feed bunk space should be larger, right? And look at this, hay or silage. only 6 inches per animal. But something like a mixed ration, TMR, grain, larger, 3 feet here, sorry, 3 times larger. So why is that? Think about it. Think about it. And disregard this for the time being, right? Right. So if the feed bunk space is less than the recommended, what do you think will happen? Will all animals be able to eat at once? Obviously not. Then which kind of animal will eat more or eat first, right? So the dominant ones will eat first and eat a lot, and the subordinate ones will eat later if there is anything left, right? But if they underfed the whole barn, by the time the dominant ones leave, there will be nothing left for the subordinates, right? There will be like all stems and all that, all the tasty nutritive stuff has been eaten by the dominant one, and the subordinate ones get low quality, low quantity feed, and this results in an unequal distribution of feed among heifers, which results in non-uniform growth, lactation, fertility, etc., etc. Right? So we want to prevent this. If you want to prevent this, you have to give the recommended length of feed bunk space. That is very, very important. Okay, so if we just summarize all of housing from point of birth, right? So obviously this phase, let's say weaning takes place here, and another few weeks afterwards, they will stay in the same calf housing in the nursery barn. So you need to know these figures, right? And then the next couple of months, right? Or 1 month, 1 or 2 months, right? They will stay in these grower barns or transitional housing, the ones that we talked about, right? Uh, 12 by 12, 3 to 5, so on, right? So you need to know these figures. And then at 5 or 6 months, right? So up to 3 months, third month, fourth and fifth months, or just 1 month, right? At 5 or 6 months, they will either shift to a different grower barn, right? Or they can be sent out for grazing, right? Provided you have high quality grazing fields, right? Or they are just kept inside a different barn, different dimensions, different stocking density, different number of animals, right? And maintained inside, right? So this is a summary of the housing, right, from depending on the stage of the heifer, right? So you need to know this, right, in case of large scale farmers, right? Okay, so it's not recommended to move to directly grazing fields or large grower barns from here. That is not recommended. You have to have this transitional housing. Right? So transitional because it's only a temporary thing. So this summarizes the different, the square footage per animal, different feed bunk spaces, etc., etc., right, for different age groups, right? So here a little different to what we learned, right? So we said during the initial phase 3 by 4 feet, which comes to about 12 to 15 square feet, but here they say 24 to 32 square feet. That's probably taking into consideration the pen and run setup, right? But we don't talk about a pen and run setup. So we have about 12 to 15 square feet per calf, right? That's the latest recommendation. So be familiar with these values, right? So see, this is also important. So of course at this stage it doesn't really matter, but after it becomes 4 months or older, because you have them in different groups, right, there has to be the group has to be very uniform, right, in weight, right? So if they are not uniform, you can have that problem of subordinate versus dominant animals, right? So already they are saying a large, they have allowed a large um, range for this, the weight range, right? So as much as 200 300 pounds, that's in excess of 100 kilograms maximum weight variation in group, right? But the lower the smaller the variation, the better, right? All animals need to be uniform basically, right? So grower barn can be something like this. So that is with a grower barn, and this would be grower pens, right? Grower barn and grower pen, or transitional pen, right? So this one actually also is actually, so these are, these are carving pen, right? So this is a carving pen, carving facility, right? So this is actually not a grower barn, right? But I said it can be something like this, right? Because there will be multiple in a large farm, there will be multiple grower pens, right? So these are carving pen actually, right? So the animal can carve here, right? And then the animal will go out that way, right? And the calf will be, the mother will go out after calving, and the calf can be collected and kept here, and so on, right? And so there will be multiple cows here waiting for calving, right? So when this one is ready for calving, it will be brought here, right? Calving takes place, right? So animal will be brought here, milked, and all that, calf pulled out, and so on, right? So this would be the actual calving pen, and then later on animal will be brought here sometimes, right? Actually it should be this way. This will be the calving pen, and then mother will be brought this way. This is the headlock, right, I presume. And then so after calving, right, maybe the milk will be milked out, right? Or certain procedures you have to do with the mother, all this will be done here. Then the mother can be kept here and discharged, and later on sent out, right? Right, so this would be a typical grower barn where see different groups of body weights, right? They will graduate from here to here, here to here, so on, right? So look at how the dimensions change. You don't need all this. You just need to understand that, as they grow, obviously the pen size needs to be larger, and even the stocking density will change, right? Right, so this would be the side view. See, have to be open so they can be taken out and all that, right? For cleaning, feeding, and animals for grazing, come out for grazing, all that, right? So these are typical, resting, feeding, so walking, uh, setup, right? So remember, typically for heifers, you don't have stalls or free stall structures that typically have a loose barn like setup, right? We won't call it a loose barn, we can call it a bedded pack, because there is bedding and there as a group together. Loose barn concept is slightly different. These were adult animals and beef animals, right? Just you don't need to know all the details, huh, at this stage. Right. So, and then of course, just like uh, calves, uh, in addition to feeding, housing, breeding, there is all these, miscellaneous management practices that you need to be aware of. Deworming, uh, tick control where required, vaccination, and then obviously this becomes important in that second phase of heifer management, from 9 months till breeding, right? Heat detection, stress synchronization, you might want to do if there's a large farm, and then of course breeding and pregnancy detection, right? Pregnancy testing, right? And then of course you need to keep records of all this, right? That is also very important. Okay guys, so that is all for heifer management. I hope you have a very good grasp of heifer management now, from point of selecting animals to breeding, feeding, housing, all that. I hope you have a very good grasp. So please do attend to the questions and answer all those and bring them to the discussion, right? Thank you very much.